Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to be talking about a guitarist in a band that doesn't care much for the country of France. I'm speaking of Mdou Moctar and their album, or his album, Afrique Victime. And I've talked before on this channel about other music that we could consider to be world music. And I've discussed about how this idea itself is somewhat colonial in its sort of othering of other music, as though music that is made in English or music that is made for a Western audience is not a part of the world, and the world is just everything else. Yet, the love of world music is also in another real way anti-colonial, right? Even if the perspective itself sort of implies an otherness, it is engaging with other people in a cultural and meaningful way. I mean, this music that we're going to be talking about today is made by someone of the Taureg. Okay? And why are we not talking about the Himba? You know, a different tribe in Africa. Why do I feel like I've heard the name Taureg so often in my life? It's because of music. It actually has taken this group of people, there's around 3 million of them, and made this relatively small group of people in the scope of the earth, and made them one of the most important music-making cultures and ethnic groups in the entire world. The problem that I have is my frequent problem of ignorance. I don't know very much about the Taureg. I don't know much about Saharan blues, of which this is an example. I don't speak Tamashek, the language that is mostly on this album. Unfortunately for me, there is very little French on this entire record. Now, what I did was I did some research. First thing I did, if you ever need to know anything about sort of African history, in my household, the best thing to do is to ask my son. I don't know why, and I don't know how, but he knows a lot about African history. So I asked him, and he told me a little bit about it. And then I watched some videos on YouTube, you know, why not? And I learned a little bit, you know. And I know one of the most important things to do is to share a map of the Taureg people, okay? So it's all right in there, not coastal, in between the Sahara and the Sahel deserts, right? The sort of ever-growing Sahara and ever-shrinking Sahel, all right there. All right, and this band, these group here, he happens to be from Niger, kind of over here in this part of that map. So that's where we are. That's where we're thinking about. And, you know, there's a lot of different themes that come up when you're talking about a Taureg musician. Some people in the Taureg community believe there should be a Taureg state, and they have been at war at times with Mali, although Mali itself, if you didn't know, is in the middle of another military coup, which doesn't really make it into the news these days. The thing about this culture, and maybe part of the reason why the music is so rich, is that it's been such an important culture throughout world history. Like, this little space of land, which looks to a very, you know, American and European perspective, like, that could not be, you cannot have a more worthless piece of land than this area. But historically, it is literally the site of some of the world's greatest riches. The ability to cross the Sahara, the ability which the Taureg have, and often, sometimes largely nomadic people who live in these deserts. The history of this area is littered with people who are capable of making that trade route, of going across. And the ability to make that route is the source of the riches of the richest man in history, Mansa Musa, who was like the richest person in history. Apparently, like, he is richer than Jeff Bezos is richer than the person who delivers your package from Amazon. Like, he was that level of rich. Because that little area is so hard to cross. And there's so much riches and so much gold on one side. So here we have this whole history, and I'm having fun. I'm watching documentaries, and I'm reading articles, and I'm trying to get into it. So how does it all tie into the music? You know, it really does tie into the music. You can't really understand it without understanding the idea of a people who have spent much of their life crossing a desert, living on a desert. I watched a BBC documentary that was quite good. I'll put a link in the description if I remember. All about an instrument, a sort of traditional instrument, the tirardent, which is a 3-string guitar, which is eventually replaced largely by electric guitars like you hear on the Mdou Moctar. And it's interesting because it makes sense when you listen to Mdou Moctar and other Western, other Saharan blues music. This makes sense. You know, not sort of a chord-based, but sort of almost like a folky single string or 3-string lots of constant resolutions, going away and going back in little tiny runs. It makes sense that what was once a 3-string guitar is now being played on a 6-string guitar, and it feels at times when listening to this music that you don't even need all 6 strings. One of the nice things about this music is the way in which the voice interacts with the strings, with the notes. At times, he sings along, just note for note, ha 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 ha, and at other times, he'll just sing something with this nice wall of music behind him and then punctuate it with the little, almost ditties, almost like you think of like Irish jigs, right? Or like fiddle music in a way. That's sort of like dancing up and down and then reaching a resolution. But unlike a ditty, the rhythms are always much more interesting, much more involved, the kind of rhythms that get your whole body moving, not like frantically, kind of at a weird lope. And then I had a conflict, and you're going to have to tell me in the comments, is this racist? Okay? I know, you're sitting at home going, oh no, don't worry. There's a PBS NewsHour documentary. I guess it wasn't BBC, it's PBS. And they talked to actual musicians from the Taureg people. And one of these musicians claimed that the rhythms of the music are partly inspired by the way that a camel walks. Now, when I first heard this, I'm like, I can't possibly say that. Just, oh, desert people, camels, like that's not cool. But at the same time, it's not like camels aren't insanely important to people who live on and in deserts, right? It's not like camels aren't actually a part, It's not like Americans don't actually eat a lot of cheeseburgers, And the more that I thought about it when listening to this music and the way this Taureg musician described it, it made sense. Because if you have rhythm that's based on feet, it's doop, 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 doop. Or based on cars, doo, But the way a camel moves, the weird sort of regular, like low, like near and far, the sort of off balance regularity of a camel. That's what you hear in the rhythms of this music. So I, Professor Sky, am not making that claim. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it is an interesting way to think about it. In a similar way that at times the music can feel transcendental. It can feel elongated and extended, and you can feel as though you are staring at a desert, that you have just spent the last 11 hours looking at dunes and feeling the sand and entering some kind of meditative and somehow not bored state. I don't know. These are all interesting things that this music brings up. And again, one of the craziest things is that, Saharan blues exists and we care about it. I talk about music all the time and why it's so important, think about reggae. Jamaica's a very small country, yet it has such an amazing impact on the entire world by its musical development. The Taureg are a relatively small amount of people who are capable of imposing their culture on the entire world. And also, the world itself has not been very kind to Africa, which is the theme of some of the album. It's sort of like I don't speak Tamashek, and much of the album's in Tamashek, some of it's in French, some of it I think must be in Arabic as well. So I don't know, but based on what I read, one of the themes is about Africa being a victim, and that makes sense. Africa has been a victim quite often, a victim of France. But it seems most of all, this is a love album and an album about being in love, which is nice. So having all this together, this whole image of the Taureg people and the Saharan blues, then we have this album. And Mdou Moctar, I had never actually heard of him. My son, the one who likes African history, introduced me to his music last year. That's the reason I'm reviewing this album. I normally would say, like, what do I have to say about Taureg music, But when we were listening to it, he was like, oh, I don't know, this is so polished. And I realized that there's something of what I think you could call the Buffalo Bill problem. I don't mean Buffalo Bill, the football team. I mean Buffalo Bill, the famous showman in America in the late 1900s, who brought his Wild West shows all around America. And he took real-life cowboys and real-life Native Americans, although obviously called them Indians at the time, and sort of paraded them around and created our concept of what the American West was through this show. Like, it's not even movies where we get our ideas of what the West was. It was because of Buffalo Bill. But when we think about what this was trying to do, one of the things it was trying to do was communicate a sort of exoticness. Exotic is a very troublesome word, right? That's a way that we other and therefore eventually exterminate other people, right? So Sitting Bull, as an example, great tribal leader, he went around on these tours. You know, people would be there and take whatever, daguerreotypes with him, whatever it is. And he was like a star. But like the question is, like, at what point is what you're watching what you came for? Because what people came there for was the real, wild, untamed West. And what they were getting was a packaged, westernized, or easternized version of it. So when my son heard this and goes, oh, wow, you know, I don't know what I'm going to think about this. Because this is a musician who came up during the cell phone movement. Apparently, like 10 years ago, there was a lot of people who were trading music back and forth on cell phones in the Sahara. And just that idea fills you with such amazing, like, oh my God, they did? That's so authentic. You know, frankly, the white, like, dominant class in their never ceasing search for authenticity will go to any lengths. We'll suck the blood and the life out of anything if it speaks to them of something authentic. So what do we do now that Mdou Moctar has had so much success, that he's able to record in America, that he's able to have a full band? Should we hear this music and lament the fact that Sitting Bull is no longer on the plains? I don't think so. I don't think this is actually a problem. I think this is just more colonial thinking, at least when it comes to this. Because what has Mdou Moctar done here? He has made a real album, not a interesting world album. Often when you listen to world music and you're not an aficionado, you just kind of like go, all right, okay, what's the next track? Okay, cool, what's the next track? You know, like, you don't have the discernment. This album has so much dynamism, has a flow, has a cohesive, like, soundscape. At the same time, it never gets boring. This is the evolution that we need. I'm happy to report that my son and I listened to this album all the way through, and he was very happy with it. You know, he was able to get past the fact that didn't sound like the real thing, man. Passing the phones back, you know, it's not all homegrown. We have to allow artists to evolve, especially if on any level we prize their authenticity or we prize their otherness, as I think we inevitably do when we are confronted with music from a place as incomprehensible as this space on Earth. So tell me in the comments, did I successfully make my point? Did I repeat myself too much? And is what I'm saying problematic in and of itself? Whenever you talk about problematic things, especially when you mainly improvise what you're saying, you can get into that trouble a little bit. But I think it's an interesting idea. And the reason why I think, like, I'm going to be giving you my homework, okay? So for every album, I give you one song to listen to as an example in case you've never heard it. And it's really tempting to do the title track, Afrique Victime. It's the most publicized song. It has the clearest theme. The lyrics have been translated into English. But I'm not going to do that, because what I want to pick is a song which I think shows the amazingness of this album. That is the third or fourth track, Talia. I'm going to put a link to it up there. If you would please subscribe to my channel. I like getting subscribers. And also please smash the like bucket. Thank you. So Talia, why did I pick this song? Because it shows the gentleness, the unexpected tenderness of this album. You know, when you have like somebody playing a guitar very loud and with lots of ringing notes and singing very loud and singing in such a way that you can tell that they learned to sing by singing without a microphone, to sing to a bunch of people, you expect a sort of rambunctious feeling, but not this tenderness. And the production on this is real production. It's not like, you know, it's like, it is top-level production with these layering of all these guitars, clapping and snapping percussion. just in the back, but the way these guitars just double over each other and triple over each other. And then every once in a while, this lead guitar comes in. Whereas it's mostly acoustic guitar, this lead guitar comes in and just adds all these little tiny notes, all these different sounds. At times it feels more like blues, at times it feels more like folk. Sometimes there's just this, like the electric guitar will play these little notes at the end of a phrase, but all of that is nothing compared to the chorus of this song. The chorus of this song makes you weep. It is so heartbreaking and beautiful and possesses an emotional range, which I am going to be honest, I did not know Western Saharan blues music was capable of eliciting in me, okay? I didn't know that I could feel this way listening to Sahara blues. I listened to a fair amount of, guitar music from Africa, and it's never made me feel like this. Now, I don't know the words, but I feel them. And I just really, really feel it on that very visceral level that music can do. It helps to break me out of the danger of being purely anthropological when listening to music like this. According to the brief research I did, the title means Your Tears, and the song is sort of about just visiting people in and around villages where he grew up in Niger. We're going to get back to Niger in a second. So that's my homework. That's the song which I think best exemplifies the album. I'm going to go through the rest of it right now. First track, Chia Smitten, which starts off with the sound of like insects and someone walking, presumably walking up to the Stratocaster that they're going to play. Full electric guitar, singing in Tamashek, some in Arabic, some in French, just a nice wailing guitar. And this is sort of one of the modes that the album has, which is basically a jam band, almost a psychedelic jam band. High school Sky would have really appreciated it. Next track is Talia. Very kind of nice effects on the guitar, a beat that's always catching up to itself, I don't know, I hear it. Creates a nice warm, like, wall of guitars, just multiple drums and guitars, very well layered all the way throughout. Mixing is funny, right? Because if something is poorly mixed, you notice it. But if it's well mixed, you don't, because that's how you know it's well mixed. This is an extremely well-mixed album, especially considering all the different elements. And how many different elements are sort of in the same realm. Like percussion that's all in the same general realm. And guitar that's all in the sort of same general realm. If this was, like keyboards and saxophones and guitars and drums, that's a different kind of challenge. Ya Habibi, I believe Habibi means like my loved one in Arabic, has drum machine sounds. And this is cool because, why not, Like when we talk about that quest for the authentic, this is not someone using a drum machine because, they're in their village, they couldn't afford a real drum. No, this is published by Matador Records. This is just a full album, a full indie rock album. This is an indie rock album, okay? And they chose to use a drum machine sound because it's an interesting dynamic with this guitar. And I really like this has the best example of where the guitar waits for the singing to be done to play. Then the song Talatana, which I've just discussed. Untitled, which is a nice interstitial moment where we have more of the sound of these insects and the walking in the sand that we heard to begin the album. And spoiler alert, will end the album as well. Astikte Akal is like very singing oriented. People singing in like a chorus. It's very nice. Like I said about this album, it doesn't have any monotony to it. And that's one of the toughest things for me with this guitar style, so based on kind of droning open notes and single notes, that it's nice having an album that you're always feeling a little bit surprised song to song. But this song has the best guitar sound. It's this like nasty rocking guitar sound. Like I don't know what it is. It's like something like there's some kind of effect on it that's really nice. Next up, we have a song called Layla, which means this is the best song named Layla, and certainly the best guitar player who has ever written a song called Layla. Very nice kind of like, seems to actually be going in the lower registers of the guitar for the first time that I heard in the album. Develops very nicely. Apparently this is another love song. And then we get to Afrique Victime. This is where we have the political message of the album, which is angry at France for exploiting Africa for... I'm just going to stop there. I am a real professor of French, and a lot of being a professor of French is explaining all of the terrible things that France has done in Africa, And And I'm going to be honest. I spend a lot of time thinking about Senegal. I spend a lot of time thinking about Algeria. Hell, I spent a lot of time thinking about Mali and even Morocco. But boy, it was only because of this album that I did some research about how France acted in Niger. It wasn't good. It was a very bloody repression. Very sort of unofficial, like just very violent and very murderous. And then now still to this day, apparently they are exploiting Niger for extracting uranium. And this is something that music can do. Because I am now aware as a professor of French, no country is good, right? There's no such thing as a good country. But certainly the more power a country has, the more it has the ability to exploit. So like, knowing that this is something that France is doing and maybe shouldn't do, it's interesting because I think a lot about the exploitation of Africa, usually mostly by China. That's sort of what interests me the most because that's what interests my son the most. But, this is all still very much really going on. So it's nice having this song. It's a mixture of French and Tamashek. And this song is sort of the most very clear sort of like statement song. It like develops with a very standard drum line, then a chorus of voices, the sort of sense of solidarity, like all singing together, some more of those electronic drum sounds, and then just a full guitar solo, probably the most real guitar solo on the whole thing. Repeats the chorus over and over again, speeds up. It's pretty rare for something so interesting musically as this album is to speed up, but everything speeds up quite often on here. Just this long jam with blistering guitars. There's a beautiful part here with seems like a fuzzy bass comes in that keeps speeding up with the electronic drum sounds in the back. And then at one point, so if you read articles about Mdou Moctar, they always bring up Hendrix. And I, as a Hendrix fan, Hendrix is, the main reason that I got into music was probably because of Jimi Hendrix. I don't know what was going on with me when I was like 12 or 13, but Jimi Hendrix was everything to me. And people say that they're into Hendrix, and people compare people to Hendrix. But this 1 minute in here where he makes the guitar scream, and it is the only time I've ever heard someone make a guitar scream, make a Stratocaster scream, in a way that made me feel like I was listening to Hendrix. That doesn't mean that Frank Zappa can't make a guitar scream great. He can. It doesn't mean Stevie Ray Vaughan can't play guitar in a way similar to Jimi Hendrix and make me feel like Jimi Hendrix. He could, right? But the way this guitar makes this one scream in this one song, it actually made me feel like I was listening to Hendrix. So I'm not trying to damn him with faint praise to say he's no Hendrix. No one's Hendrix except Hendrix. But this was at least able to do this one thing. And that's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm great. Do you hear it too? If you're a big fan of Jimmy, let me know. At the end, we have the song Bismali Atagar, which is very nice, kind of hand drum and claps. And what's nice here, again, this whole album has a sense of progression, okay? Where in the beginning, it's very just out. And then by the end here, his voice sounds tired and out. And the insects are all the way through, creating a sort of incidental polyrhythm. Very delicate and complicated guitar lines weaving in together. And it has this really nice ending where it builds just builds up and builds up until eventually you have the ending, which is just like someone walking in sand. Just like it ended. Just like it began. And in some ways, this reminds me of Talia as well, which has a similar thing where some interesting things start to almost happen at the end, but don't quite get there. Like at the end of Talia, there's this like chant and like singing in a whisper, and these multiple guitars come in, these kind of compressed guitars, and you get the sense it might go somewhere else, but then it ends. So there's my review. My potentially problematic review, I don't think so. I think I'm okay. But I'm always open to criticism because it's really hard to watch somebody and think they're being wrong and not feel like they will listen to your criticism. And I will. All right, cool. So there's my review. I told my son I would do it, and I'm happy. I'm happy that he taught me about it. And for God's sake, for the news, every once in a while check on BBC World or something. just to pay a little more attention to what's happening in Africa, because there's often quite important things happening, and we just it takes a little bit of effort to pay a little bit of attention. So I don't know. Jeez, that's preachy. Oh, well. There's the camera.